Total War is heading to China and making some quite major tweaks to its approach along the way. This is a period full of larger-than-life characters, bringing an epic sense of drama to Creative Assembly's classic war simulator. Having seen the game at E3 and chatted to some of the team, we're going to talk you through the features that have us excited, from hand-to-hand duels to the epic horse looting. Also, apologies in advance if I mangle the pronunciation of character names. I'll try my very best not to. As the Three Kingdoms name suggests, our setting is China in the 2nd to 3rd century. This is a period of great upheaval, charting the crumbling of the Han dynasty and the big old rumble that follows, as legendary Chinese generals attempt to bring the country under one rule. What's really interesting is that there are two distinct takes on the period. There's the historical records of the time that chart the specific movements of those involved, and there's the fictionalized account written in the 14th century. This novel, Romance of the Three Kingdoms, is a dramatic retelling of events, casting those involved as grand heroic figures, almost like the Marvel superheroes of their day, but with much more impressive helmets. These are the versions you'll be more familiar with from games like Dynasty Warriors or films like Red Cliff. Creative Assembly are themselves tapping into both versions of events. When you start a campaign, you can choose to play in Romance mode or Classic mode. Opt for Romance, and you'll see these almost superpowered versions of the characters on the battlefield. Warriors like Lu Bu and Yu Jin, who can single-handedly charge through enemy ranks. One member of the team likens them to driving a combine harvester through the front line of defences, and I'm very much on board with that. Play in Classic mode, which we haven't seen in action yet, and the same characters behave more like traditional generals in previous Total War games. They are embedded in a unit of their elite bodyguards and will not be pole vaulting around on a magic spear. The differences also extend to events you'll encounter in the two versions of the campaign. Some characters are total embellishments in Romance of the Three Kingdoms, and so won't appear in Classic mode. For example, in the novel, Diao Shan, one of the legendary Four Beauties of China, convinces Lu Bu to betray and kill his master. She isn't thought to exist in reality, so you can wave goodbye to her in the Classic campaign. But the legendary characters of the time aren't just special attacks. In the Romance mode, which was demoed at E3, they fundamentally alter your approach in battle. While at the start of the campaign you can still pick a faction with a leader, we're told there'll be 11 to choose from at launch, the makeup of your army on the battlefield is determined by the generals you bring to the fight. You now have multiple generals in battle, each leading a retinue of unit types specific to their expertise. A strategist like Xiao Cao might contribute trebuchets and archers for long-distance destruction. While he won't be charging into the fray to do any pummeling himself, he's about brains over brawn after all, his presence on the battlefield can buff the units of his other generals. But as he peppers the city walls with projectiles from afar, his fellow general, Yu Jin, who is a brawling guardian type hero, can march his armoured spearmen into the heart of the battle. Of course, the downside to having generals leading chunks of your army is what happens when those generals die in battle. It will negatively impact their retinue, lowering morale and unfocusing them in the fight. Characters also have relationships with one another, more on that in a second, so if a beloved general kicks the bucket, his friend or family member could potentially go berserk in battle and charge their retinue in a suicidal bid for revenge.
Cousin, we come to aid you!
What with generals being the linchpin of your forces, you'll also need to watch out for the new one-on-one duels. These aren't available between every named character. A strategist like Cao Cao wouldn't be able to outthink a spear to the face, so is best off lurking at a distance, but your champion type heroes can wade in. Instigating a duel is done from an in-game menu. You select the option and your hero will seek out the target for a fight. These are brilliantly animated scraps, much closer to the elaborate choreography of Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon and other martial arts films of that ilk. You can even select specific moves and abilities to influence the fight. Of course, it's not just about winning or losing. Heroes can die in duels, yes, but they can can run away too. In fact, you might choose to retreat to keep your valuable general from death's door, although a cowardly escape might disappoint his troops and leave his retinue weaker in the future. Likewise, you can order your men to help swing the duel in your favour, though this could be perceived as a dishonourable move. On the flip side to this, pulling out of a duel that you're winning may make your rival grateful, which could have positive repercussions should you encounter them under different circumstances in the future. I love the idea of generals having a reputation, both with their men and other generals, a reputation forged through decisions on the battlefield. But this network of relationships goes much further than this. An idea that Creative Assembly keep coming back to in Total War Three Kingdoms is guanxi, which is the concept of interpersonal connections that govern Chinese society. In less fancy terms, it's the vast social network that exists between all characters in the game, whether they're family, friends, allies, rivals, servants or masters. These historical figures aren't just skill trees and battle abilities, they have relationships that manifest in smaller moments, like banter between generals during the battle, but also grander happenings on the campaign level. For example, if you opt for an aggressive approach, that might upset a more peace-loving general. That relationship can deteriorate to the point that that character will leave your faction, but the general who leaves could himself have a tight bond with other characters, who will then want to leave with him out of solidarity. It's an exercise in plate spinning then, not just keeping your favoured heroes happy, but watching out for mistakes that might poison that relationship from a different angle. It works the other way too. You might end up hiring a general you don't really want, just because they're good chums with a more valuable asset. The web gets even more tangled when you start factoring in the aftershocks of individual battles. Kill a cherished rival, and his allies will seek you out for revenge. Or your faction could gain a dishonourable reputation and make enemies of otherwise neutral characters. Going back to that earlier example of a friend dying in battle and triggering a berserker rage, beyond the battle, that loss could lead to a period of mourning for years to come, having knock-on effects for all involved. Of course, all this extra drama can be toned down in classic mode, but I love the idea of Total War with a spark of life. They're not just playing pieces on the board, but people with passions that can help or hinder. And besides, who would choose to play in classic mode when romance has characters like Xiao Dun, who took an arrow to the eye, then plucked out the arrow and ate his own eyeball? Yummy. Of course, the focus of the E3 demo is to demonstrate the role of generals and this more character-led action. Creative Assembly are a little cagier on wider changes to battles, though you can see some new ideas in play. Siege AI is much improved for starters, with enemy forces pulling back from the wall once our men breach it. They retreat to choke points deeper in the city, where previously they might have charged endlessly at our forces. There's also a hint of new formations inspired by the military tactics seen in Romance of the Three Kingdoms. In the demo we see spearmen in a tortoise formation, boxing themselves in with shields to protect themselves from the city's archers. If you've seen John Woo's excellent film Red Cliff, a major inspiration for the game by the way, you'll know that there are lots of colourful tactics deployed in the period. I'd love to see them incorporate ships filled with mannequins that they use to waste the enemy's arrow supplies, for example. The focus on generals also means that you can loot specific characters who you beat in battle, and then deck out your own heroes in their outfits to boost stats or earn new abilities. In the case of this demo, you can claim Lu Bu's epic horse, called Red Hare. It's the second fastest horse in China apparently, so I imagine Lu Bu will not be happy seeing you sit on it. I plan to feed it lots of sugar cubes and fatten it up as the ultimate diss.
Yet from the cinders, the powerful and righteous emerge.
Anyway, that's a quick overview of what Creative Assembly brought to E3. It's quite a departure from Total Wars of old, though I like that there is an option for people who want to enjoy it in more traditional play. Personally, the idea of a character-led piece is right up my street. It sounds like Total War meets Fire Emblem, and the idea of manoeuvring a more delicate game of personal diplomacy at the campaign level should be a really neat framework for the individual battles. Of course, more on all of this when we have it, so please do consider subscribing so that you don't miss our future Total War videos. Thanks again for watching Rock Paper Shotgun, and we hope to see you soon. Goodbye!